Can Brazil supply everything that China wants or needs?
I would say that if you look the shipments from January to August, they are historical level, the Brazilian soybean shipments to China. So from January to August, Brazil exported to China around 75% of its exports. Just in August, over 80%. So of course, there is also the soybeans from Argentina. Now the export tax is back again, but during the 2 days last week, Argentinian farms, they exported a lot to China as well. So if you look just South America, Brazil and Argentina, I would say that they would be able to attend the Chinese market this year, and maybe Chinese markets, Chinese buyers, they will not need the American soybeans if you look their needs. But of course, we have a lot of factors in this game that could change tomorrow. So I know that there is a huge concern nowadays here in the US related to this trade agreement. So far, we can say that Brazilian farmers, they are being beneficial. So far, we can say that the Brazilian farmers, they are helping from this trade war because they are able to export more soybeans to China this year. We have seen scenarios pretty similar than we saw in 2018 in terms of movements. And remember, from 2018 until 2024, Brazil increased 40% its soybean production. So nowadays we are talking about a volume that Brazil is exporting to China that's much higher than was in 2018.
So China may have a 100% need satisfied with Brazil, with Argentina, and with whatever soybeans that they're producing in China, because they're producing some as well.
Yes, if you look the needs of the Chinese market, they produce only 20 million metric tons, but their needs is over 120, 30 million metric tons. They need to import at least 100 million metric tons. From January to August, just Brazil exported 7 million metric tons. We also have a little bit from Argentina, and that's not too much. But I would say that still have time for the U.S. soybean go to China this year and fill this gap. I mean, but of course, for that, it's necessary to have a trade deal between China and the United States. So even though in 2018, the amount that the China's share on the U.S. market was around 18%. So if they increase a little bit than that, the United States could reach the same share than 2018. Still very low if you compare to the last year that the total soybean exports from the U.S., around 50% went to China.
Okay. Brazil is certainly growing more and more every year. They're increasing acreage, they're increasing production, both in beans and corn. Is this something that's really going to take over satisfy global demand in a big way? I think a lot of American farmers are going to wonder, where's their place in the sun going to be?
Yeah, I mean, when you say that, we need to remember that also Brazilian farmers, they are struggling right now with very high cost productions and revenues as well. The situation is not wonderful in Brazil. They are selling more easily in the international market because they have a good relationship with China. They kind of have an over-dependence of China, but they are still struggling. They are also struggling with very high costs production. And the prices in Brazil, the international market, the prices are very low. Brazil, they have some advantages because, for example, nowadays, the premium on ports, they are helping to offset these low international prices. The exchange rate also help a little bit to offset this. but they are still having a tough time in terms of costs, production. Also in Brazil, farmers have big challenge related to transportation, related to storage, and also related to interest rates. In Brazil, the interest rate nowadays is 15%, 15%. Yes. So the inflation is under control, but the interest rate, the cost of money in Brazil is very high. So if the farmers, they saved some money in the good years, they are in good shape right now. But if they didn't, they are facing maybe the same situation than Americans nowadays in terms of financial trends.
So cost of production is tough, high interest rates, and they've got to sell beans on the global price level, not just setting anything that they want to. So it's really, they don't have quite as good a time and as one might think, even though they've got a major market to supply and they're happy to do it.
Yeah. I would say that the only difference that nowadays Brazil doesn't have any trade war with China, that's the main buyer. Other than that, the same challenge that farmers are facing in terms of cost production and low international prices is the same challenge that Brazilians are dealing right now with the additional interest rates in Brazil that continue increasing and the challenge related to transportation and storage. That's a historical problem in Brazil that government after government, they cannot. The situation nowadays is better than used to be in the past, but it's still a lot of challenge around the transportation system.
Well, I think a lot of folks are under the impression that China has come in, has helped with river infrastructure, has helped with rail infrastructure, things like that, but that's still not quite enough then.
Yes, I mean, I would say that the Chinese investment in Brazil is less than people think that it is. They do investments in Brazil, but more indirect investments, sometimes in chemical companies or inputs. They are doing some investments in ports facilities in Brazil, but it's not something that will change in a couple of years because Brazil is a huge country. We are talking about long distance. So even though if you make an investment in a port in some region, will not change the entire picture. But when you think about storage, the most investments in Brazil are from American companies, ADM, Bunge, Cargill. We also have Kofco, that's from China. But these big traders, during many years, they did the highest investments in Brazil, at least in terms of storage. But transportation, we have some issues because there are some operations that they are under federal legislation. So they cannot have private investments. In some places they can, but not everywhere. So yeah, it's not a simple equation to complete, yes.
Okay. What have we not talked about that you think American farmers should know about this relationship with Brazil and the U.S. and China?
Sorry, could you say again? Could you ask again?
What should farmers know about this relationship with Brazil and China and the U.S.? What would you like American farmers to know?
Yeah, I think it's a very tough moment nowadays, especially because it's harvest season and farmers are struggling to find alternative markets that would replace Chinese. That's a big buyer, but the same time we know that we are talking about the global agribusiness. All these countries, they are connected. So even though U.S. farmers, they need the Chinese market, the Chinese buyers, they also need the American products. So I'd say a trade agreement is not something that just Americans would like. My guess that Chinese would like this trade agreement as well because it will be helpful for everybody. We are in the end of September. We still have some time to take some advances in negotiation and to have a better last 3 months of the year that could bring a little bit of relief for the U.S. Farmers. But the same challenge that U.S. farmers are facing here in terms of cost production and low international market prices are the challenge that Brazilians are struggling as well. The only difference that in Brazil they are increased the shipments to China, but all other challenges related to financial situation, they are kind of the same, with additional that in Brazil we have interest rates around 15%, and there is few helping from the government like a subsidies. That's very rare in Brazil. The government, they don't have money for that. And even though when they have money, sometimes they don't put on that.